Through almost 30 games this season, the Minnesota Timberwolves of all teams are sitting atop the Western Conference with a 22-7 record. So is it time to put the Timberwolves in the contenders or the pretenders category? Hello everyone, my name is Matt McLaughlin, your residential, friendly neighborhood, sports and fashion enthusiast, and today I'm going to be breaking down why the Timberwolves have skyrocketed to first place in the West, and what does this mean for their playoff chances. So the biggest change between last year and this year has really been on the defensive side of the floor. Their improvement has been absolutely phenomenal. In 2022, the Timberwolves allowed 115.8 opponent points per game, 25 assists per game, allowed opponents to shoot 47.1% from the field and 36.9% from three, and their defensive rating was 113.1, good for 10th best in the league. This year has kind of signified that an already solid defensive unit has taken an even greater step forward. So far this season, the Timberwolves are allowing 107.3 points per game, that's best in the league, 24.4 assists per game, that's top 5. Opponents are shooting 44.6% from the field, that's number 1 lowest. Opponents are also shooting 33.7% from three, which is top 3 in the league. And that defensive rating that was at 113.1, that's dropped to 108.1, which is best in the NBA. And I think what this speaks to is that Minnesota has figured out their defensive rotations, their defensive roles, and really how to navigate this Towns and Gobert pairing. Because so far it is obvious that this big three is better now that they've had more time to mesh. In 2022, the three-man lineup of Gobert, Towns, and Edwards played 478 minutes together. Their offensive rating was 106.7, their defensive rating was 104.4, and that net rating was at 2.3. But this year, they've played the same amount of minutes basically, and the results have been pretty startling. The offensive rating is at a 115.9. The defensive rating has slipped to a 107.7, but that net rating is up to 8.2. There is still one glaring weakness, though, with the Timberwolves. If you break down opponent field goal percentage by distance from the hoop, there's one area that the Timberwolves are struggling in. For the most part, they're inside the top 10 for either lowest field goal percentage allowed, but inside that 10 to 14 foot range is where Minnesota is struggling mightily so far, allowing 46.4% of attempts to go in. That is 7th highest across the entire league. Minnesota's 4.4 field goals made and their 9.6 attempts allowed are the 2nd highest, trailing only Milwaukee. And I think that weakness is glaringly obvious in some of the highlights from Minnesota's last game against the Oklahoma City Thunder. In that elbow range, that 10 to 14 foot range, the guards are trying to pass off their man to the big man, but the big man is either too far away to close out or just can't get there in time. The shooter is pulling up too quickly. And I think that's where Minnesota is really going to be exploited in the playoffs if they don't clean this up soon. I think what this speaks to, it's not just that Oklahoma City is a legitimate playoff threat in the West, but also I think Minnesota's really weaknesses of what happens when Rudy Gobert is stretched out to the perimeter, or he's got to guard a guy like a Chet Holmgren that is cutting, navigating screens and off-ball movement so much that Gobert's kind of head is spun around and he just can't recover down low. We know this story over and over again. What are you going to do with Rudy Gobert in the playoffs when offensively he's pretty limited? That is going to be a tough question for Minnesota to answer because, here's hoping Jaden McDaniels doesn't break his hand on a wall again. What is the depth of Minnesota beyond just Anthony Edwards and Karl Anthony Towns? Which, speaking of Karl Anthony Towns, are we sure that Karl Anthony Towns just isn't going to implode again in the playoffs? For as much shit as Joel Embiid gets, and I understand why he gets it sometimes, Karl Anthony Towns has, I think, never made it out of the first round in his entire career. Karl Anthony Towns has more games where he scored under 20 points than he scored over 20 points in the playoffs. That is where I struggle to really put Minnesota in the number one really certified contender. They are a huge threat. Denver needs to watch out. OKC needs to watch out. Towns really needs to show that he can be a certified star and a reliable player in the playoffs. Any team with Rudy Gobert in the playoffs can be exploited, especially on the defensive end of the floor and on the offensive end of the floor when you just feel like you're playing against 4-on-5 if you're Minnesota. But those are my thoughts. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Is Minnesota a legitimate contender? Are they not that great? And as always, I'll catch you in the next video.